Okay, so welcome everybody, and I'm wanting really to just do a bit of a check-in with this session called Take Care. Obviously thinking about you, thinking about how you are. Oh, can't see my video. Okay, what am I doing wrong?
So there should be a little button at the bottom, which if you click on it, it will start your video. Anneliese.
Oh yes, the very easy thing.
There
yes,
we are, we see you. We're all coming to terms with these new pieces of equipment.
Oh my goodness me. Okay, yes, apologies for that. Is that good now?
That is perfect. Good? Thank you very much.
Right, lovely. Okay, so yes, there might be another couple of hitches along the way as we proceed. So how are you? How are you now? How are you in this crisis that we're all going through? Where are you now with your feelings and emotions? What's going on for you now? What's all this generating for you? If you are working now, I'm wondering whether you're actually feeling, as you hear your family and friends and people on social media talking about how they're using all this time off work as a great opportunity to learn a new language and put together a Thomas the Tank Engine cake and sign up to your virtual yoga or whatever. You may be feeling mixed feelings about that if you're actually working hard now. If you're coming back to work, maybe you're having mixed emotions about coming back, excited, energized, apprehensive, guilty, maybe all at once. I'm thinking about how the videos are circulating on social media from colleagues who are feeling overstretched and frustrated and overwhelmed and vulnerable, how that's impacting on you. And at the same time, what are your feelings and thoughts? You see your colleagues, you see yourself responding to this crisis in so many extraordinary ways, in such creative problem-solving ways, with such good humour, with such calm and rational thinking, with enormous stamina and resolve. I'm wondering where you are right now. This is a marathon, isn't it? It's not a sprint, and it looks like we're in for the long haul. And of course, you're used to working hard, you're used to long hours, and yet it's going to be more important than ever, I think, to take care of yourself so that you can keep caring for others. And this is a strange world. As a communications specialist, I'm interested in the way that new context is being added to old words like social distancing or self-isolation or shielding or furlough, and a whole range of terms and skills for communicating virtually, of course. And of course, this new sign-off, the new sign-off of emails and texts, I've noticed, stay safe and take care, hence the title, Take Care. So you'll also, I'm sure, like me, be noticing these different aspects of this new world emerging and the ways in which you yourself and those around you are experiencing this strange new world. And the different ways of getting to terms with that abnormality of our current existence. And as I work with my clients and thinking about meeting you this afternoon, my clients are doctors like you. Two key themes seem to keep coming back. One of them is about emotion and how to manage those emotions. And the other key theme, not surprisingly, is energy and how to maintain it. So in this webinar, can I suggest that we just focus on just those two E's, energy and emotion? And I invite you to use this time for you and only for you. Time to think about how you want to take care of yourself now and in the months to come, and in the aftermath of all of this. How you want to make sure that you're taking care of yourself so that you're able to meet your own needs, as well as the needs of your patients and colleagues and your family and your friends, all of which, of course, matter. So let's think about emotions, and you might just want to do a little check-in with yourself right now about where your emotions are now in the present, where we are this afternoon. And I would just invite you to engage with those thoughts and feelings, not to push them away, but just engage with them. You know that suppressing and trying to control emotions never works, does it? They're going to emerge somewhere, perhaps later, with a different person in a different place, but somehow or another they're going to emerge. So if you care about anything, you know, anything that you're encountering, it's normal, isn't it, to have an emotional response of what we're going through right now. If it doesn't matter, then clearly it's not a problem. But where it does really matter and it affects you profoundly, it's something to be in touch with. It's something not to wallow in, obviously, but absolutely to be connected with. And the expression of that emotion can really be helpful in managing the emotion. It's not that we're in it, it's not being in the emotion only, it's expressing the emotion in order to manage it more effectively. So let me give you an example. In the current uncertainty, maybe you find yourself feeling anxious about something that hasn't even happened yet. And that would be normal, wouldn't it? This is a very serious virus. Maybe you're playing out your worst fears. Do you perhaps have images flickering in your mind about your loved ones becoming very seriously ill, you falling ill, for example, you know, you're in vulnerable situations yourself? And I wouldn't suggest for a moment that you dismiss any of these thoughts and feelings. What might be helpful might be to actually engage with them and just think to yourself, yes, I'm thinking that, I know that. It hasn't happened. And maybe there's something I can say about that. The evidence suggests that it's unlikely, or we're in this together, we're going to get through it, or measures are being put in place to manage the spread. You'll know the best thing. You have your own wisdom, and you'll know the best thing to say to yourself when you engage with your thoughts and fears. Something about anticipating this anxiety of loss, or of something happening to somebody that we care about. It hasn't happened yet, so let's live in the present. And now you can think your positive thoughts and appreciate the small gifts of now. What would they be for you? Just have a think. The small gifts of now, what are they for you? And let go of what you can't control and breathe. That's all that is possible to do right now. And also you can be really compassionate and kind to yourself. Maybe also with other people, by the way, those people whose rather untypical behaviour, I'm thinking of a special example in mind, which I might share with you some other time, might be an indication that they're also struggling. So kindness and compassion to yourself as well as to other people. So managing emotions, not repressing them, not trying to control them in that repressive sort of way, but really engaging in the conversations, allowing for your feelings, not wallowing in them, and just knowing that this is part of the normal stuff that you're going through. There's another thing that might be helpful as well. Have you noticed that we have feelings about our feelings? How that makes things even more complicated. We have feelings about our feelings. So in your inner dialogue, you might find yourself saying things like, I feel sad, but I shouldn't feel sad because, and then a whole range of reasons why you shouldn't feel sad. Again, try not to push that away with some sort of rational thing going on or suppress it. Just go with it. That's how I'm feeling right now. I acknowledge that. And maybe there are ways of expressing emotions too. You'll have, you know, your friends, obviously, your colleagues. You may be part of a COVID-19 support group. I know there are quite a number of those being set up now all over the country, where you can just decompress, tune into well-being. There's all sorts of those available. If writing is what works for you, then writing your ideas down, writing your thoughts and feelings down, recording them on your phone. If you play a musical instrument, if you sing, if you paint, if you draw, whatever way you want to acknowledge and validate those emotions. Or simply, interestingly, studies have shown just sitting quietly, just working through that is enough to process it and let it be. There's some thoughts. Of course, there's so much that's going on at the moment that we can't control. It's out of our control. the only thing we have any control over is how we respond to it, how we respond to the events around us, and how we respond to what's going on in the world. And you'll already have worked out your own physiology of stress and your own different ways of responding. But perhaps if you can detach from the stress of being that situation and focus on how you're responding to it, maybe that would also be helpful. And well, there are some various ways that one could do that. Of course, I'm just going to do a disclaimer now, because you're healthcare professionals, you know all this stuff. So do forgive me while I say something that's quite obvious. But when we're thinking about energy, let's just think about energy now. You know, your physical, your mental energy, your social energy, your emotional energy, your spiritual energy. How are you checking in with that and following through? So the things that you know about in order to maintain energy, having regular exercise, taking time for relaxation, eating well, making sure you're getting the right nutrition, sleep, making sure that you're connecting with those people that are really important to you. I know that you know all these things, but this afternoon, just to have a think about how you want to intentionally connect with those different parts of your life to maintain your energy levels in different ways. And the nutrition, obviously, you know about that in terms of the healthy eating and the really enjoying meals at home. But particularly at work, I think that's the challenge, isn't it? How to maintain your energy at work. I know there's a department that I'm aware of where the consultants have got together and they've got a stash of snacks and drinks where everybody can go and just top up when they need it. I'm sure there's something similar where you're working, or that could be put together. Keeping hydrated is so important when you have so little time, but drinking that water. And I suppose when you're on the go like that as well, just noticing how much caffeine you're taking in. And my goodness, wouldn't say no to alcohol when you finally get home, but you know how to monitor that too. And what are the ways that you want to find to have real downtime? Oddly, social distancing means that we're all spending more time at home, even when you are working. So what are the things that you really enjoy and that give you relaxation? Maybe it is something different that you haven't done before. And maybe there's a whole list of things that really give you relaxation, whether that's listening to music or board games and puzzles and phoning friends, whatever it might be. Or is it for you just simply being? Is it not about doing anything, but simply being? And how might you want to do that? The exercise piece, you know, as well, don't you? And again, this is really the sort of thing that you're probably engaged with already. And if you're not, how would you like to engage with that? Whether it's going for a run or a walk or doing virtual yoga, which seems to be the big buzz thing at the moment, dancing, whatever it is. Do some housework if you're absolutely desperate, but I would avoid that if possible. And think about how you maintain a level of fitness through exercise, and also that becomes relaxation as well, doesn't it? How are you doing about sleep? Do you find yourself having trouble falling asleep, or do you just fall asleep instantly? Some people find that if they're having trouble falling asleep, a real bedtime routine, an intentional bedtime routine, you know, calming techniques, if you find these helpful, self-affirmations, breathing exercises, real positive thoughts about what's happened in the day, expressions of gratitude, exercises, mindfulness with head apps like Calm and Headspace and so on. Or even just stopping worrying about falling asleep. Sometimes that can do the trick and actually work that. Whatever it is for you, you probably have a thought about that already and already putting those in place. And if not, then maybe this is the time to start really intentionally thinking about that. And connection. Oddly, we're talking much more about connection than we ever have before because we can't see people so easily. So obviously, whether you live at home or you're living with family or whatever, how are you going to enjoy that time together on Zoom or maybe with your family watching DVDs, playing games or whatever? Once you've got home and you're showered and you're changed, how would you like to just decompress when you get home? And it's probably more important than ever that we keep our connections going and that you reach out to the people that you love and who love you. And also disconnect. Sometimes there is so much possibility for connection. You may find that you need to disconnect occasionally in the kindest possible way. I'm just going to pause for a moment and wonder whether just those two strands of thought that we've explored so far, so the idea of emotions and the thoughts around energy, whether that conjures anything up for you in terms of where you are right now. And just to give you some time to just think about that. And while that's happening, I'm hoping that I'll be able to do the following, which is share a screen with you.
I've got a question for you, Anneliese, as well.
Yes.
So someone's asked, you talked about engaging with our feelings. And can you give any kind of practical tips on a way to achieve that? It can be quite difficult sometimes.
Very difficult. And I think one of the ways in might be just being curious, not give yourself a hard time with third degree about what's going on for me now, but rather just being curious. What are you noticing about your emotions? Can you name them? Because sometimes that's really powerful. Just naming the emotions. Very often emotions swirl around in our heads, but also in our bodies. And in order to calm that down, sometimes just naming what the emotions are can be really helpful. But also being curious, because having named the emotions and sought to identify what's going on for us, having engaged in that way, we can then say, well, so where has that come from? Where is that coming from for me? What's that connecting with for me? That particular emotion, that particular feeling. And that's the way in to a positive conversation with oneself. It's never about making judgments, being tough on oneself, saying, oh, I should be doing that and I ought to have done that, and all of those guilt feelings and so on. It's not about that. It's about being curious about where have these emotions come from for me? What might that be about? How can I name them? Is that helpful?
I think that's really helpful. I think it's a useful exercise to go through.
I'm going to try now and just do what I can, see if I can do this. I may not be able to do this, but let's give it a go and see.
So let me
any
know
other
when
thoughts? Yeah.
Well, we have got one more question. I don't know if you want to take it now. So there's someone here. They say they're waiting for details for their return to work. In the meantime, they've started to feel apprehensive about the things in the medical workplace that have previously been unhelpful to their well-being. For example, the work attitude. So many of us have felt like this. Feeling the need to stay back late to the detriment of family life because that is almost deemed a sign of working hard, etc. Any tips on this? And I guess I had also felt that because I think so many of us who are not in the medical workforce currently maybe have really good reasons why that is. So how can we achieve these kind of negative attitudes that we've previously felt?
There are many things get swirling around in my head to this question, because it's one that I hear a lot. And there is a piece of assertiveness about this as well, and assertiveness is about expressing needs. It's not always about getting what you want instantly, but it is about expressing needs. So at the beginning, really trying, if at all possible, and it might need pinning somebody down, to have a conversation. I sometimes refer to this as a contracting conversation, but it's really a conversation about how are we going to work well together. And it's a real exchange. It's not saying I want, but it is a real exchange about what is manageable and possible and sustainable for you. And obviously all of the skills and the experience that you bring, that you want to bring, and that you want to be able to bring to this particular situation as well, even more so. But in order to be sustainable, there might need to be a conversation around what really works for you. So it might be that actually you don't have much flexibility for staying on late. If you have other responsibilities, you have children, whatever it might be, but not only because of that, because sometimes, it's not for that reason that you need to leave on time. But just to explore a little bit about how are we going to work well together. And many people, I think, who have tried this in a very positive way, not at all laying down lots of conditions and so on, but just exploring how are we going to work well together. Let's think about, tell me about what the peak times are, tell me what the pressures are. Okay, well, this is what I can bring and that's sustainable. How can we work together on that? How are we going to make that work? There is more we could say about that, but for the time being, does that take you somewhere, the person who asked that question?
Unfortunately, they're anonymous, so I hope so. It's certainly helped for me.
Come back again if that's
yeah.
the case, and do come back again, because there's more that we could say.
And if our participants want to pop any more questions in the Q&A tab while Anneliese is speaking, I will forward them on to her soon, so they can be anonymous if you want. So Anneliese, please continue and let me know when you have space.
Okay, that's absolutely fine. I'd be very happy to do that. Okay, so now we've talked a little bit about energy and a little bit about emotions. I just wanted to show you this slide, and you'll have your own names for this, by the way, but I just wanted to put this in front of you as a prompt, really, for your own thinking. That why is it so important to tune in with our emotions and to positively manage those emotions? And you'll see there's positive emotion, negative emotion on either side of the screen. And why is it so important to just know where your energy is? Now, interestingly, energy is not always the same as fatigue in that sort of sense, fatigue or absence of fatigue, or not, feeling thriving and not tired at all. Just have a look at where the positioning is in the thriving zone and the recharge zone. Positive emotion, high energy positive emotion in the thriving zone, and there's some words to go with that, but you might have other words for your thriving zone and what that means for you. Positive emotion but low energy, so what does the recharge zone mean for you? It's interesting, it's an extraordinary percentage. It's something like athletes spending something like 80% of their time actually in recharge zone, not in thriving zone as one might imagine, but in the recharge space. So how do you get the recharge that you need to build up from that low energy place, still with the positive emotion? And that's why we've been trying to think about the emotions and engaging with those. Of course, the risk is the double whammy of negative emotions and low energy is the place that obviously everybody wants to avoid, the burnout zone. So let's just lift our eyes away from that burnout zone for a moment and go to the surviving zone, which you might recognize only too well. High energy, adrenaline's going, need to work, focused, doing your work in the way that you're used to doing, working long hours in the way that you're used to doing, but often you might be in survival zone, and that is high energy but negative emotion. And you might again have your own words to add to this list. Knowing where you're in a high energy place but with negative emotion, just knowing where the boundaries are and where you go too far to tipping into the burnout zone is so important, isn't it? And knowing what the thriving zone of high energy and positive emotion is like for you, what are the words that generates for you, and what are the feelings and thoughts that generates for you, and how to stay in that place. In other words, how do you keep recharging so that you can stay in that place? And when you're into the recharge zone, you're doing that deliberately and intentionally, knowing that you're recharging. you might have some thoughts about that. So this is a way of doing an energy emotion check, noticing where your energy is, and almost walking yourself through the quadrants of this circle. So where am I now? Am I in the thriving zone, high energy, positive emotions? Where am I? I'm in recharge at the moment, but that's absolutely fine. Low energy, but positive emotions, and it's fine. And I'm in that place. I'm dealing with some emotions that are not necessarily positive, but that's also okay. It's part of my recharge. Am I in surviving zone? What does that feel like for me? How much time am I spending in this surviving zone? What are the triggers that put me into this surviving zone? Just be aware of what that is for you. You'll know your own biorhythms, so there's that as well, your knowledge of yourself, but just knowing where you're walking into these different quadrants as you move through your working life, and also at home. Where am I thriving? What does that feel like? What does recharge mean for me? What does surviving zone mean for me? And how do I pull myself back from that really damaging negative emotion, low energy burnout zone? And I don't know whether you might have some thoughts looking at that might occur to you that you could take away and work with. I'm just going to pause while you think about that. Okay, so going back to, are we back to where we should be? Okay, can you see me now?
Yes, we can see you.
Good. I'm getting feelings of insecurity.
It's difficult, isn't it? This is part of everybody trying new things.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'm in my thriving zone right now. I'd like to make that clear. So think about what energizes you. And that'll be different for different people. We've talked about the importance of good nutrition, good exercise, relaxation, and so forth. But where you get your energy from will be very particular. For some people, it is going out there and doing lots of sport and exercise and so on. And for others, it's not that. It's very good to keep fit that way. But actually, in order to boost energy, maybe you need something that whisks you away from where you are, in whatever way that might be. So please, feel free to watch as the kind of programs that normally you don't want to admit to your friends, whatever that might be. But whatever removes you from the situation that you find most helpful. For other people, it's completely different. It's intellectual stimulation that generates energy. So whether that's actually studying or reading or learning about something new or doing puzzles or whatever it might be, engaging in something new that generates that sort of energy. For other people, it's very much quiet time. And their personality differences, of course. It's quiet time for introspection, for mindfulness, time for reflection, time perhaps for participating in groups, groups of friends, but also support groups, sometimes working with people like me who work with clients on well-being and so on. But whatever it is for you, what are your go-to energy boosters? What really works for you? So you know that spending too much time in the survival zone leaves you at risk of tipping into burnout. So you're going to be hopefully spending more time in recharge, like the athletes I mentioned. Very, very importantly, engaging with your emotions and engaging with your energy so that you can maintain this very challenging, through this very challenging time that we're in, your well-being. I'm wondering also, I'm just curious to know how you feel about this actually. So like many people all over the country, I also go out with our neighbours to our doorsteps every Thursday evening, and other people in their balconies and so on, and applaud the wonderful work that you're doing and that everybody in the health service is doing on our behalf for us. And rightly so, my goodness, rightly so. That's absolutely deserved. We should be doing that. It's the least we can do. And at the same time, I'm wondering whether, does that put a sort of extra weight on your shoulders, that somehow, you know, the knight in white charger, on the white charger, you know, that can have its pitfalls as well, can't it? Maybe, tell me what you think about this, but maybe there's something about generating a language of oughts and musts. You know, I should be doing this and I must be doing this and I really ought to. That kind of unhelpful self-talk about guilt and regret for doing something or for not doing something, for what you should have done or what you ought to do, what you must do. Just be aware of not taking everything on yourself. You can't accept responsibility for everyone all the time.
So there's a question on this, which I thought was a really good time to come to it. It's a really good question, actually. It's something I've also reflected on. How can we conquer the hero narrative? I've always been happy to never return, but I have come back over a sense of duty and a fear of how I will view myself if I didn't, leading to me pestering my local trusts and fearing I will miss this window of opportunity to help.
Oh my goodness, that is such a question. There are many components in that question, so thank you so much, and I would really love to see that written down. If I could have that as a question afterwards, I'd really love to come back to that. So yes, there's all sorts of stuff going on, and remember that we'll just briefly talk about this later, but you're connecting with something that is so important to you, the something, whatever it was at the time that brought you into medicine in the first place. And that connection is so strong that it becomes, very often it becomes part of your identity. That might be where it sits with you right now. So one of the things I'd invite you to say to yourself, and really know this in your heart, is I am a doctor, but I am not only a doctor. You know, your wonderful self is independent of the job that you do and would still continue whether you were a doctor or not. Now, after that, if after that you say, yes, I have certain skills and I do enjoy parts of this job, in fact, so there are many reasons why I would like to work in this environment that brings me joy, if we think about Marie Kondo and her book, then if that's where it sits with you, then that's a free decision that you make. But you are so, so much more than a doctor. That's a huge part of who you are, and it's what you connected with when you chose to pursue this profession. But, you know, you're not a martyr to this. You're not a martyr to this or a victim in any way. You're offering your skills and your experience in that very wonderful way that you know how to do. And that's what you can do. Imagine you have some amazingly expensive and beautiful golden platter in front of you, and you are very carefully, in taking care of yourself, you are very carefully putting in those parts of yourself that you cherish most, those components of yourself that make up the wonderful person that you are. And think about what you're putting into that wonderful golden platter. What you want to take care of, what you want to protect, what you want to cherish when you are taking care of yourself. So you're a hero, certainly, heroine, I should add, and hero, but not a martyr. And so resist that temptation to take on more than is reasonable for you. I'd say that to anybody in these particular caring professions, notably caring professions, where there is that really strong connection between you, the individual, and the work that you do. I'm not sure that I've said everything there, but I hope that's helpful in some way.
Thank you so much.
So, a few top tips then. So when we come through this period. Now, the other thing is that you've probably noticed this as well. People are talking about this as though one day it'll all be over and we'll all go back and we'll wake up and it'll be normal again. And I'm actually wondering whether that's even something to hope for. you know, really, after all that we've learned, after all the things that have been done, all the things that have been achieved. And in fact, even now, this crisis is prompting us as a whole country, isn't it, to think about how we move forward from here, and whether simply returning to previous ways of doing things. And I would include in that previous ways of doing things in the NHS and of working as doctors. I would include everything in that. Is that what's needed or wanted? Are there now other priorities emerging? Perhaps space for better decisions in the future as a result of what we're living through now? And it's going to take a while to get through this, to really get through this and manage what's going on, so that we can say, yes, okay, now we've achieved a level of stability. And on a personal level, maybe your own priorities in life are also being altered. Perhaps there are new perspectives that you're discovering about your life, about what matters to you and what doesn't matter to you. You may be discovering all sorts of things, and about to discover, and will continue to discover, qualities and capabilities and abilities and resources for creativity and all sorts of strengths that you didn't even know. You hadn't discovered them yet. You didn't even know they existed. And this kind of terrible adversity that we're in now can be really transformational for individuals and for whole communities. You know, so beliefs and behaviors are changed, and friendships are revisited, and values are revised and refreshed, and relationships are clarified and enriched, tested sometimes as that as well. Family bonds may be being tested, friendship bonds may be being tested. But on coming out of this, emerging from this, will be yourself stronger, closer to those people around you, to those colleagues as well that you've been working with. I think this is also true of organisations, communities, our country as a whole. We're only a collection of individuals after all, so what we're all living individually is going to be magnified, isn't it? And so part of this taking care now is about also preparing for that taking care of yourself afterwards, during and beyond the time we are now. So preparing for now and preparing for then. And we might take some time to process, and you might take some time to process some of the experiences that you're living through now and the emotions that you're living through now that have come out of and that are resulting from this period of adversity. And please say to yourself, and that's okay. You know, that is absolutely okay. In the meantime, of course, there are the things that we've talked about already that can help with the now and also contribute to preparing for the then. And at work, for example, in the moments that you have, talking with colleagues at work, taking time to ask how they're doing as well, and exchange some connection with them, you'll have the opportunity to offer your skills and your experience, of course, but also offering help as it's needed. Maybe it's about sharing resources that have been helpful to you, useful information that might be going around, just generally looking out for each other. And it's probably something that you do anyway, but it's even heightened in this sort of environment. However, I'd also say seek out support when you need it. Simply because everybody, of course, is under pressure. Everybody, of course, is working very hard. Do seek out the support that you need from senior members in your team, from senior colleagues in the team, from colleagues in the team. Ask for the supervision that you might need. Check in, ask for those check-in conversations that you might need. It's not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of professionalism, it's a sign that you care. So again, it's not a case of trying to be a superwoman or a superman. It's really seeking out the support when you need it. The trump card, of course, is always that it's everything that you do is for the benefit of the patient. So please do that when you need it. And know your own limits. You know what's sustainable for you. Maintain your own boundaries. Think through those boundaries and think through what works for you, what is manageable for you. Of course, you'll delegate where appropriate, and you'll muck in when appropriate and when needed. But also, maybe it's helpful to think, you know, what are the things that only you can do? with your particular skills, where you are now and your experience, what are the things that only you can do? And that way you'll be sure of offering the best that you can offer in that particular situation, whatever it is. Maybe there are other things that other people can do, but you know, that it's a case of really trying to use your own professional resources in the team in the most effective way possible, and maintaining your boundaries helps to do that, alongside with all the other stuff. Stay hydrated and top up with food and so on. Oh, and something else, this will really surprise you: breathe. I know, just breathe. Have you had this feeling, have you had this experience where sometimes, because of the focus and the intensity of what's going on, you know you're getting some oxygen because after all you're still upright, but you're not really breathing that well? So do intentionally, not gasping for breath obviously, but just be aware of your breathing. There is no one way, you know, for people to manage. People often ask me for tips and suggestions and so on, and I will happily share whatever I can share. But in the end, you're the wisest person. You're the person who will know your own package of strengths and strategies and resources that work best for you. What I would say is be very compassionate and kind with yourself. If you're struggling at any time with anything that's going on, please don't feel, and just remind yourself, you don't have to succeed every step of the way. You don't have to be heroic all of the time. You know, you don't have to be the person who never ever sheds a tear, who's always on it. At the same time, think about really small actions you can take, and that's probably what we're doing this afternoon. Really small actions that you can take that will help you and help those around you. And as we said before, with don't should on yourself, trying not to get stuck into unhelpful beliefs, you know, assumptions, limiting assumptions. I shouldn't ask for help, for example, since we were just talking about that. Asking for help is a sign of weakness. It's a limiting assumption. It's an unhelpful belief. That would be an example of such a thing. When you're looking after yourself, remember, you are also helping to look after others. So you'll get your turn, obviously, to support the colleagues around you in your turn, as well as caring for your patients, of course. So in a time of so much uncertainty, it would be usual, wouldn't it, to reach out for some feeling of being in control. And one of the most destabilizing things, I think, about what's going on around us is how difficult that is, with the situation about COVID-19 changing daily, hourly. It's impossible to predict. There are models, of course, modeling's going on all the time, and you have your own professional expertise which says there's a chance that this might be reaching a peak in 2 weeks and 3 weeks time, whatever it might be. And people are asking about, you know, when will we not have to do this social distancing anymore? What will the exit strategy be? When will we get back to normal again? And all of this becomes in itself a cycle of stress. And those are all things that we have no control over. We have to let go of some of that stuff. And you're busy dealing with it. So I'd invite you to just let go of all of that. You'll want to stay up to date with what's going on in the latest news, but I'd invite you to just control the amount of time and energy you spend thinking about COVID-19. Maybe also just, this is where the disconnect might come in as well. Stick with your trusted sources of information, you know, and that where they're coming from, your colleges, the hospital, your clinical departments, reputable news sources, whatever it is that you trust. And just be aware of all of the stuff. I know you know exactly what I mean. The sort of social media stuff, the Twitter stuff, the rumors and the hearsay stories. And just focus on what's within your control, living in the now, following all the guidelines, enjoying your time at home, being positive and kind and compassionate, of course, with other people, of course, but mainly we're talking about this afternoon with yourself. I wonder if it's appropriate to just pause for a couple of minutes. Any thoughts people would like to share? Questions to ask?
So there is a question here, and it's someone has really wonderfully shared their personal circumstance, which I'm just going to anonymise a little bit for posterity. So she's coming back to work. She's worried about coming back to work in the NHS because she lives with someone who's a high risk, vulnerable person, and she's afraid of bringing COVID home, and she's afraid too, if she moves out, that person would be, have less support, and if they became unwell, then she feels like she couldn't bear that, having left them. And on the third hand, she feels that, as a senior member of the team, she has a value to add to the NHS, and she feels duty. And she's had a difficult time in the past, so she's worried. How do you have any way that she can face that?
That's such a difficult place to be in, with so many conflicting desires, really, and commitments, and different loves, really, different types of love going in different directions to your work and to the person that you live with, and so on. I don't know if this is helpful at all, and perhaps we could talk separately about this. I don't know if this is helpful, but I am aware there's a lot of redeployment going on at the moment, and I'm just wondering whether there might be a safer place for you to work. Now, I don't know if that's viable for you, in terms of you wanting to bring your full experience and so on. Is it possible that there be another part of the health service, a whole other side, of course, to what we're talking about, which is the number of doctors and healthcare professionals generally who need to come in just to keep the service going while we're managing while you are managing this terrible virus? I don't know if that's even an option for you, but would it be worth discussing whether there'd be another way in which you could offer your expertise and your skills, but perhaps not in a place where you're going to be at the front line? There might be other things to talk about with that. So if you would like to, again, we can engage about that following this session.
And we're going to signpost some links to some more resources at the end as well. I've got a collection that I'm going to post for everyone. There's another question as well, another really difficult personal circumstance. So it's someone who's just returned after maternity, had a really rough maternity year, as so many of us have. And has felt really down and anxious, and had some support with their mental health, and has just come back and really didn't feel like they had a choice about doing that. She says, people talk to me as if it's a privilege to be back at work. I don't feel like I can talk to my family because they think I'm better, which I am, but I'm worried that the burden of coming back on its own was enough, and it's a huge burden with everything else that's going on. How honest should I be with my team about the struggles I've had and how hard I'm finding it to come back?
This is a theme, isn't it? This is another theme that comes up so regularly, about showing vulnerability. And so many doctors feeling that they can't show any vulnerability at all, that somehow that will be a black mark in some way against them. Incidentally, by the way, thinking about leadership, vulnerable leadership is right up there where it is right now. That's the big thing that everybody is talking about. The best kind of leader is the vulnerable leader. So it's ironical that in healthcare we should be saying expressing one's vulnerabilities is something that isn't acceptable in some way, when actually the whole profession that you're in is about caring and compassion and understanding and empathy. One thing I would say, and forgive me, perhaps you would say, oh, you would say that, wouldn't you? Is it can really be very helpful when you're going back to work like that and you have had experiences that have been very tough, to ease you back into work. It really can be very helpful to work with somebody like me, work with a coach. It isn't therapy. It's not it's not psychotherapy, it's not anything like that, but coaching deals with the now and going forward. So in that sense, it's a very dynamic engagement where two people, the coach and the client, come together and they think about the client's objectives and what will help them to move through the particular phase that they're in at that moment. And I would just suggest that you might want to explore that, because I have worked with other people in that situation, and just having that opportunity to think through what's going on for you, to think about how you're going to manage that engagement going back to work, how you negotiate some tricky situations, and having the chance to talk that through is really, well, so clients have said, is really helpful. And there will be a professional support unit wherever you are in the country, where there are coaches who can help with that. That's one suggestion. And again, do get back to me if there's more about this that you would like to talk about, but that's the first thing that comes to mind.
So there's at least one person who'd like to know how they engage with you as a coach, and I would also like to know how to engage with coaches more generally, other than just in the PSU.
So could I maybe send something to you, Lizzie? Would that be all right if I were to do that? I can send a little thing.
I know that people can find your website by Googling your wonderfully unique name, because I've done it.
It's one of the rare advantages of having a strange name.
I'm there too.
That's true. So Dialogue Links, and Dialogue Links, my company name, will give you a description of what's meant by coaching, for example.
Yeah.
And please forgive me, because that website is rather out of date and is being updated as we speak, but it will certainly give information about coaching and how to access me, but also I can send you information, Lizzie, as well, about how to access coaches up and down the country.
Everyone who is a trainee can access coaching through their professional support unit in their local office, HE local office.
Free.
Yeah.
It's free. Yeah.
And then there's also stuff with the BMA, there's stuff through practitioner health program as well, maybe more to the counselling side than to coaching side. I'll post some links at the end. We've got a couple more questions as well, if that's all right.
Shall I just move on to finish this?
Yeah,
I don't want to not have the questions though, because I love the engagement, and thank you to people sending in questions. Just to move on to this next bit, because again, there may be something that's useful for people here. Just by random chance, things are never random, are they? But just by random chance, I just happened to be reading the March edition of the Harvard Business Review, where David Kessler, now David Kessler is someone who worked extensively with, and in fact wrote a book with Kubler-Ross, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, the one Kubler-Ross, you know, the cycle of grief, shock, denial, anger, depression, acceptance, and so on. You remember that change curve. And he was interestingly talking about how what we're going through at the moment can be mapped really with this cycle of grief and loss and sadness that Kubler-Ross talks about in her books. And so he says, for example, you know, we start with the shock and denial, this virus won't affect us, it's too far away, it's only in China, and so on. And then the anger phase, my freedoms are being taken away from me, it's not fair, someone should be doing something about this. And then that depression phase, when will this end? When will I ever be able to, you know, hug my grandma again or whatever? And then that bargaining piece, all right, so let's do some social distancing for a week or two, okay, and then will it be all right? And then the acceptance phase, and the acceptance phase, I think, is where we are now. Although, of course, we know that it's not just a curve, is it? We go backwards and forwards in these emotions. Okay, so this is happening right now. How do I manage it? And all of those positive actions are the acceptance phase, aren't they? You know, I can wash my hands, I can do social distancing, I can self-isolate, I can volunteer to help, I can learn how to connect virtually with others, you know. And of course, you in your particular situation, oh my goodness, I can be a doctor, you know, I can contribute my professional experience and my know-how to this situation. What's interesting about his work, Kessler's work, is that he adds, after the shock and denial, the anger, the bargaining, the depression, the acceptance, he adds another word, what he calls the sixth step. He's not the only person to have written about this, by the way, but he's the most recent person I've been reading about. And that sixth step is meaning. And why am I bringing it to the session today? When he talks about it, he talks about how meaning, or that connection with sense of purpose and that connection with values, your own sense of purpose in your own life, is a way of also going one step beyond just acceptance, the action mode of acceptance, but actually moving through to something that's very positive and long term as well. So I'm thinking about the following phases, as it were, that are going to follow after we manage this huge crisis. After you, I keep on saying we, but it's after you manage this huge crisis on our behalf. You know that it takes a long time to recover from trauma. And yet it's the meaning piece that may be most helpful for people, and perhaps most helpful for you. I don't know. What is it that brought you into medicine in the first place? What do you connect with at your most profound self, that sense of purpose, whatever that means for you? Values, the thing that makes you do what you do because you know it matters for you. So I offer that to you. It's Kessler's sixth step to the Kubler-Ross curve. He's written a book on that as well. So yeah, a couple of questions maybe. You said there were a couple.
That's
Lizzie.
right. Yeah, I've got some. So there's one anonymous one here. Any advice, Anneliese, on how to manage if your vulnerability is not well managed by others? Honesty can be met with negativity and insensitivity, and find the prospect of this almost harder to deal with than just being open.
Of course, we have a skin for a reason. You know, we have a protective skin for a reason, don't we? It isn't, vulnerability may not be about sharing your most intimate soul, but vulnerability can be expressed in an assertive way. That may be surprising for some people to hear. Assertiveness, remember, is about expressing your own needs, having clarity about your own needs, first of all, on oneself, and also expressing your own needs. And I think the way in which that can be done assertively, curiously, at the same time as explaining what your vulnerabilities are, means that you are not seen as being vulnerable, you're just seen as being clear. And that can make all the difference. And so I just offer that to you to think about how, in the most assertive way. And one of the things that can work very well, no time to talk about it now, but can I just offer it to you? Non-violent communication. It's a part of assertiveness. Non-violent communication. It's a thing. It exists. There are books about it, notably by Marshall Rosenberg, Non-Violent Communication, A Language for Life. And I would really heartily recommend it as one of the great tools of assertiveness that would, among other things, help in that situation. So should I just do a quick roundup, Lizzie?
Yes, and then I'm
aware that we're getting near to our top time now.
I know, and some people are leaving us, which take care.
Take care, absolutely, take care. And thank you for being with us this afternoon.
I will share some resources in just a moment, but I'll let you wrap up.
Okay, so quick tips then for taking care of yourself. Check your energy levels, keep those batteries topped up in whatever ways work best for you. Make conscious decisions, be really intentional about how you're taking care of yourself. Look for opportunities to have fun and a laugh. You remember that laughter is therapeutic, but also interesting. Laughter and humor changes our perspectives. So, you know, funny stories and jokes with colleagues and family, whatever works for you, watching funny comedy programs, whatever, but look for those opportunities. Stay informed, of course, but please ration your intake of information, especially on social media. Focus on what you and the team are doing to make a real difference, and you are, and you're doing it well. Keep really positive. We don't know when this will end, but we know it will end. So you can stay positive and remain in that positive space with your own thoughts, being kind to yourself, and just monitoring the language that you're using to yourself and about yourself in your inner dialogue. Don't be harsh with yourself. Be kind to yourself. And have faith. I don't just mean in the religious sense, although for many people that will be absolutely crucial. But have whatever that means for you in terms of connection with your purpose and your meaning in your life. You're doing the best that you can because you believe it matters. That's the real sense of connection that matters. So today we focused on energy and emotion, those two E's. And as we close, I'm going to cheat a bit because I'm going to add in one more, and it's called E for emergence. And I'm going to a book by Otto Scharmer, who wrote this fabulous title, Leading from the Future as It Emerges. And that's exactly what we're doing. We're leading from the future as it emerges. We have no idea what the future holds. But what we have seen is that this crisis is opening up ways of being and connecting and of being sources of creativity and ingenuity and strengths and capabilities that we, even as a whole country, we didn't know we possessed. And I feel that this leading from the future as it emerges is true for every single one of us in our own lives, as leaders in our own lives, as leaders of our own lives. We're leading from the future. You are leading from the future as it emerges. And in the NHS, you are going to be there leading that emergent future. So for now and for the future, for yourself, for your family, for your friends, for your colleagues, for your patients, I'm going to come back. But above all, for you, really take good care of yourself.
Thank you so much, Anneliese, for that amazing set of ways to deal with this really challenging time. I'm just going to go through a couple of resources for everyone to see. So thank you for coming. You can come to another session. We've got several more clinical knowledge refreshers, and you can find our full programme on the HE events page. You can also watch again. These webinars are all recorded and they're uploaded onto the HE website. It does take a little while to edit the video files, which I'm sure you can appreciate since they're all over an hour long. So do allow 5 days to a week or so for them to be uploaded. We've got an unofficial peer-maintained Facebook group, which is called COVID Returning Doctor Support, where people can find over 900 people in the same situation who are all sharing many of the same emotions. And it's a really useful support for practical questions and assistance, as well as emotional support. And also there's a huge growing collection of resources on this Google document found at bit.ly/COVID-returners, which I really urge you to go and look at. That's got links to all of the wellbeing resources that we've talked about today, and as well as all of our webinars and lots of online resources for revision and some practical registration type information as well. And finally, people have asked about certificates for their portfolio or for continuing professional development. And we aren't able to provide these as such, but we've been advised that the best way to capture your learning from these seminars is to screenshot either your invitation email or this webinar, upload it to your portfolio, and then the really important part is to provide a formal reflection on what you've learned, and that should make evidence for your appraisal at ARCP that you've had some learning and development today, which I'm sure we all have. So thank you so much for coming to this session, and hopefully see you at another one soon. Thank you.